Warning! Kinda Murdery contains adult themes, explicit language, and descriptions of violence. It is not suitable for anyone, and we recommend you stop listening now.
True crime with a dash of the paranormal, the garish, the strange, and the darkly comic. I'm Zevin Odelberg, host of Kinda Murdery, a podcast that's about more than just murder. It's my very own pocket dimension, home to a curated collection of bizarre and compelling stories, the unsolved, the unsettling, and the unbelievable. I cover it all, just so long as it's kinda murdery. Like it says in the intro, I am Zevin Odelberg, and this is Kinda Murdery. If you're ready, please join me as we uncover what truths we can and solve what mysteries we may. Kinda Murderies. Murder at the Elegante Hotel starts now. Glenn Flanagan had the art of road life down to a science. A methodical approach carved from years of travel. His rolling suitcase wasn't just luggage, it was a mobile drawer, a symbol of a transient existence, but one that he had mastered. In this hotel room, as in so many before, each item had its designated place. A floor for the soiled garments, a closet rod for the shirts still fit for public view. His toiletries occupied their own compartment in a cloth case, hanging ceremoniously on a bathroom towel rack, like a banner of daily rituals. And let's not overlook the worn brown leather boots, seasoned by countless journeys, aligned near the suitcase like guardians at a temple. These boots had stories embedded in their scuffs and creases, an unspoken chronicle of where they'd been and what they'd seen. They held more than just the contours of Greg's feet. They held fragments of his life's mosaic. His faded jeans, cast aside, spoke of labor and longevity. No glamour, just grit. They were shed like a second skin at the end of each taxing day. In their stead, he donned cotton pajama bottoms, a transition as symbolic as it was literal. In his shift from hard-wearing jeans to soft pajamas, he hung up the roles and responsibilities of his waking hours. It was a curtain call of sorts, an actor stepping off stage, shedding a character to embrace his authentic self, if only for a few hours of rest. In the quietude of his hotel room, surrounded by the artifacts of a life spent on the road, Greg Flanagan found his order in chaos, his stability in flux. That is what makes this story so harrowing. It's a story of a sanctum that provided no sanctuary at all. A story about how a life so meticulously arranged could still harbor invisible perils, waiting to shatter the fragile equilibrium. For now, though, the room is silent, the boots in their place, the toiletries hanging from the rack, and Greg is in his cotton pajamas. Here, in the sanctuary, in this brief moment of stillness, all seems right in the world. But as anyone versed in the capriciousness of fate would know, appearances can be dangerously deceiving. For Greg Flanagan, most evenings unfolded like a well-rehearsed play, each act predictable yet comforting. In the confines of room 348 at the MCM Elegante Hotel in Beaumont, Texas, he had all he needed to sequester himself from the world. He'd kick the air conditioner into high gear, its hum a soundtrack to his solitude, its chill a metaphorical barrier between him and the world outside. He'd sit, propped up by pillows, leaning against the headboard of a bed that wasn't his but felt close enough. A clean white hand towel served as his tableau, a miniature stage upon which the artifacts of his evening were carefully arranged. Ashtray, cigarette pack and lighter, BlackBerry, TV remote, and candy bar. Each object had its role in the performance of his evening. It's not just that he was watching TV, mind you. He was engaged in a solitary ritual as deliberate as a tea ceremony, as intimate as confession. Smoking a cigarette, breaking off pieces of a Reese's Crispy Crunchy bar, sipping root beer. Each act was a quiet celebration of the mundane, a slow dance with routine. The movie of the night was Iron Man 2, a tale of a hero wrestling with identity and responsibility, themes that might have resonated with Greg. On September 15th, 2010, ensconced in his hotel sanctuary, Munching a candy bar, drinking a root beer, and smoking a cigarette, Greg Flanagan started watching Iron Man 2. Then comes the unnerving part. He missed the ending. Think about that. A man so wrapped up in rituals, so intent on finishing what he started, didn't get to see how the story closed. It's like reading a novel and finding the last page torn out. For Greg, this wasn't just about missing the climax of a blockbuster movie. It was a break in the ritual, an unforeseen interruption that, unbeknownst to him, signaled a more ominous cutoff. In a room chilled to his preference, among possessions meticulously placed, Greg Flanagan found himself in a storyline that he didn't write, couldn't control, and wouldn't see to its end. This was the night when his carefully orchestrated solitude was shattered, when the plot took a turn he couldn't have scripted. The room may have been cool, but the events that unfolded were anything but. What happened that evening in room 348 long remained an unsettling mystery, a jarring deviation in a life measured by consistency. The story didn't finish the way that Greg expected, and therein lies a tale as gripping as it is tragic. In the realm of quiet men who make their mark, Greg Flanagan stands out. His early years were defined by vast, untamed oceans as he worked as a chief engineer on seafaring vessels. But life is a series of acts, and Greg transitioned to his second act seamlessly. He became a landman in South Texas, facilitating the uneasy relationship between landowners and oil companies. He was good at it, joining forces with his brother Michael to carve out a prosperous niche in a city just east of Houston. Every Monday, the call of his responsibilities had him drive a 2-hour stretch from Lafayette, Louisiana to Beaumont, Texas. The journey was an unremarkable parade of roadside Americana, punctuated by industrial behemoths like the ConocoPhillips refinery. His home away from home was the MCM Elegante Hotel, specifically a room in the Cabana, a 3-story wing that gave a nod to leisure with its swimming pool and potted plants. On the evening of that fateful Wednesday, September 15, 2010, life seemed to follow its routine script. He received an email from his wife Susie updating him on tax matters. His reply, "You're doing good, babe," might have suggested a moment of satisfaction, a brief digital exchange that bridged the miles between them. Then, irony with a sinister edge. Greg was watching Iron Man 2, a film punctuated by fabricated high-stakes violence, unaware that his own life was about to be punctuated by a very real and catastrophic event. During the film's climactic battle, Greg was blindsided by a blow so violent, so brutally real, that it severed his narrative right there. This blow wasn't a plot in a film. It was a shattering assault on Greg himself. As if propelled by sheer will, Greg managed to stagger off the bed. He aimed for the door, perhaps a subconscious attempt to escape the inexplicable horror unfolding. But his body gave out, and he fell, his face meeting the green rug in a final, grim encounter. By that point, Greg Flanagan was likely already departed from a world he had navigated with such deliberate care. It's a disconcerting thought. Greg had survived the unpredictability of the high seas, navigated the complexity of oil rights, and built a life composed of routines and familial bonds. Yet, in a room surrounded by the trappings of his chosen solitude, a vicious blow tore through that carefully constructed life like a rogue wave, leaving everyone to grapple with the unsettling mystery of his untimely end. The cruel irony is inescapable, that a man so grounded, so tethered to his routines and responsibilities, would meet such a violent and mysterious end. The tale of Greg Flanagan is a haunting paradox, a narrative abruptly cut short, leaving us, the audience of his life story, with a set of difficult questions that have surprising answers. The ripple effects of Greg Flanagan's sudden death emanated far beyond room 348. For a man who valued his routines, failing to call his wife Susie in the morning was more than an oversight. It was an alarm bell. His silence set a series of events into motion. Concerned co-workers, unanswered knocks, an unlocked door. These were the first steps to unraveling what had happened in that room. Susie had been expecting a routine call, but instead she set off a cascade of inquiries that led 2 of Greg's co-workers to his hotel room. Once the door swung open, what they found was a diorama of stillness, of life interrupted. Greg lay prone, a cigarette arrested in its journey to his lips. The room was suffocatingly warm, in contrast to Greg's preference for a cool environment. Enter Detective Scott Apple, a man who looked like he was molded from the clay of law enforcement culture itself. His initial assessment of the scene found little that seemed suspicious or out of place. No forced injury, no signs of struggle, and Greg's wallet filled with cash, still in his pocket. There was nothing to suggest anything but natural causes, a notion that even Greg's wife Susie was prepared to accept. Greg was a man who'd lived life on his own terms. His disdain for authority and modern health culture were well known. He'd chain-smoked since his teens. Perhaps, as Detective Apple mused, this was just a man meeting the end his lifestyle had long promised. But that's the deceitful thing about appearances. They simplify complexities. They mask the inexplicable. On the surface, everything looked routine, a term that in the context of Greg's meticulously structured life had always offered comfort. Now it veiled an unsettling mystery. While the police may have seen the incident as routine, treating it almost like a procedural formality, there were elements that defied explanation. Why was the room so warm when Greg liked it cool? What could cause a man so attuned to his environment to drop dead without warning or reason? The initial phase of the investigation concluded with the perfunctory click of a camera, capturing images that would serve as the last record of Greg's life and surroundings. His body was then taken for an autopsy. On the surface, it seemed like a closed case, an affair needing only medical rubber stamping. But those who knew Greg and the life he had built couldn't shake the feeling that the story was incomplete. Susie found solace in the idea that Greg had died as he lived, on his own terms. Yet, there were unanswered questions, ones that neither the police nor the routine photos could put to rest. While Detective Apple may have initially categorized this as a, quote, natural causes thing, unquote, the situation whispered more than it revealed. For a man so steeped in routine, what broke the cycle? What script went awry? It seemed like a minor medical mystery at the outset, but the real puzzle was just beginning. The tension between what appeared routine and what could be deeply mysterious sat heavy in the air like a note sustained, waiting for the next chord in a dissonant song. As far as investigating death in Beaumont, Texas is concerned, medical examiner Dr. Tommy Brown was an institution, speedy, methodical, and deeply knowledgeable. He carried himself with the air of someone who had navigated the landscape of mortality more times than he could count. Each autopsy was conducted with precision, 45 minutes of inspecting, measuring, and dictating notes. His quick-spoken demeanor and seemingly eccentric appearance only heightened his credibility in the professional community. In Jefferson County, Texas, his conclusions were treated as gospel. So, when the body of Greg Flanagan lay on the table before him, the expectation was for another routine case. At first glance, the man appeared healthy for his age, no obvious signs of trauma or degradation, just a lifeless shell of what was once a vibrant being. But as Dr. Brown delved into the nitty-gritty, an anomaly stood out. A half-inch laceration on Greg's scrotum, with accompanying discoloration and swelling. It was a jarring discrepancy amidst an otherwise unblemished physique. Beyond the laceration, there was more. The bruising expanded, rising through the groin and fanning out across the right hip. These signs didn't square with the early theories of natural death. And it wasn't just a matter of inconsistent details. It was a stark contrast that screamed for an explanation. What had struck Greg with such force, and why? A small abrasion on the left cheek from his fall to the rug seemed inconsequential by comparison. Here was a case that defied expectations. It seemed to ask more questions than it answered, poking holes in the theory of a natural death. Detective Scott Apple may have entered room 348 thinking he'd find answers easily, but Dr. Tommy Brown's findings pointed to something more complex, possibly sinister. The inconsistencies made the mundane elements, the room temperature, Greg's unresponded emails, the undisturbed items on his towel, all the more unsettling. What had started as a routine inquiry now treaded into uncharted territory. In a room where a man had seemingly built his own fortress of habits and preferences, something had violently intruded. The more Dr. Brown discovered, the more the narrative seemed to unravel. Dr. Brown was no stranger to the baffling and inexplicable, but this mystery was a doozy, even for him. Here was a man who by all accounts should not have met the fate that befell him in such a jarring and violent manner. As Dr. Brown moved through his 45-minute routine, it became increasingly clear that this was anything but a routine case. What looked like just another post-mortem on Dr. Brown's table had evolved into a profound mystery. This was not just a question of how Greg Flanagan died, but a question that dug deeper, unsettling all who delved into it. What exactly happened in room 348? The palpable tension between what was seen and what was found couldn't be ignored. It seemed as though the very room itself held its breath, awaiting a resolution to its newly enshrouded mystery. When Dr. Tommy Brown cut into the torso, the narrative of a simple or natural death was immediately dismantled. What lay before him was a gruesome scene of internal destruction, lacerations on essential organs, broken ribs, and a hole in the heart, an injury most often seen in cases of fatal stabbings or gunshot wounds. What should have been a routine autopsy had suddenly escalated into a dire revelation, uncovering a theater of violence inside a seemingly undisturbed body. The trauma was too severe to be a mere accident. Something, or someone, had inflicted this. Greg's injuries weren't just isolated or random. They were interconnected in a pattern of violence that had unfolded in a chillingly brief period of time. He would have bled out internally in less than half a minute, his life leaking away before he even had a chance to understand what was happening to him. It was an agonizing, shocking end for a man whose room bore no signs of intrusion or struggle. Brown's findings couldn't be shrugged off as an unfortunate medical event. This was intentional, gruesomely violent, and enacted with a precision that left hardly any external marks. The severity of Flanagan's internal injuries was a grim testament to the calculated brutality of the act. Dr. Brown didn't hesitate. The evidence was overwhelming, almost screaming at him from the autopsy table. When he filled out manner of death on the official form, there was only one word that could encapsulate the horror of what he had found: homicide. At that moment, the stakes skyrocketed. Flanagan was not a man who had died, he was a man who was killed, and it begged the question, how could a murder so violent leave behind a crime scene so immaculate? What kind of person or force could enact such precise devastation without leaving a trace? The revelation that this was a homicide not only rocked the investigative team, but also turned room 348 from a mundane hotel space into a chilling crime scene. Room 348 had safeguarded its terrible secret, until Dr. Brown's scalpel laid it bare for all the world to see. Detective Apple was a seasoned officer, but nothing in his experience had prepared him for this. When he got a call from Dr. Brown, it wasn't just a plot twist. It was a seismic shift in the landscape of the case. Dr. Brown likened the internal injuries he had found to those usually seen in victims of catastrophic car crashes or industrial accidents, not in a man found alone in an undisturbed hotel room. Now, Beaumont, Texas wasn't a hotbed of criminal ingenuity. They averaged about 10 murders a year, and most of them were straightforward, the motives transparent, and frankly the perpetrators careless. Typically, the clues lined up like a simple equation that just needed solving. But this was something else. Apple knew he had entered rarefied terrain, the kind of case that could define a detective's career, either as a triumph or as an eternal question mark. For weeks, then months, Apple turned over every piece of evidence, interviewed every potential witness, and even revisited the scene multiple times, hunting for that elusive piece of the puzzle that would make sense of the nonsensical. The intrigue of a once-in-a-career mystery soon gave way to fatigue and a harsh reality. Hard cases are hard for a reason. The conundrum was maddening. The scene of room 348 bore no evidence of the ferocious violence that had shattered Flanagan's insides. No signs of a struggle, no broken furniture, no marks on the walls. Just an eerie silence that contradicted the story told by the dead man's battered internal organs. And the impossibility was compounded by a lack of any commotion heard by neighbors. Could such a horrific assault really leave everything and everyone around it so untouched? The questions stacked higher and higher. How does a man endure a beating so severe that his inner body resembles a car wreck without showing comparable exterior damage? How do you reconcile a lethal, clearly intentional attack with a crime scene that stubbornly refused to look like one? It was as if Flanagan had been killed by a ghost, A specter capable of inflicting deadly harm without leaving a trace. Apple was stuck in a maze with no visible exit, casting shadows in a case that defied all conventional wisdom. And the weight of that paradox wasn't just professional, it was profoundly human. A man had been murdered, and the absence of answers was its own form of injustice, a secondary victimization that compounded the tragedy of Greg Flanagan's incomprehensible death. The nagging question mark that loomed large over the investigation was simple but vexing. Why? Why would anyone target a man who, by all accounts, had not a single enemy in the world? What was the motive? Greg Flanagan had a life that was a study in reliability. His home life, especially with Susie, was the bedrock upon which he built everything else. They were a pair stitched together by destiny, so much so that they'd walk down the aisle twice in one lifetime. Susie, with her unique blend of southern warmth and rock and roll spirit, was the last person who deserved to be plunged into this chasm of uncertainty and pain. Her voice was a medley of emotions, heartbreak intermingled with fierce resolve. It's the voice of a woman who can extend a gracious invitation with one hand, while holding a line in the sand with the other. Anyone listening could sense the duality of her emotions, part grieving widow, part lioness, ready to pounce at the merest sniff of a clue that might lead to her husband's killer. To say she adored Greg would be an understatement. Their rekindled love story had the hallmark of a fairy tale. When they reconnected years after their initial marriage, Susie called Greg, and when he answered and realized who it was, he said immediately, "I've been waiting for you to call." It's the kind of sentiment you can't fake. It has to come from a place of true devotion. Their love was, in its way, evidence. Evidence that Greg was not a man of conflict, but a man of deep connections. Detective Apple had to recognize the anomaly of this case. The victim's profile clashed with the very idea of being a target. Greg was a man who managed to navigate life's complexities with a kind of quiet grace that made him universally liked, even respected. The circumstances were more than puzzling. They were nearly paradoxical. The nature of Greg's injuries indicated a violent struggle, a battle that left its scars deep within his physical body. Yet the setting, the Elegante hotel room, offered no corroborating signs of such a brutal confrontation. And Susie, well, she was a reminder of all that had been inexplicably lost, a human emblem of the case's deep, seemingly unanswerable questions. Greg's life was marked by the absence of the very elements that often play into violent crimes. No vices, well, except for cigarettes and candy bars. No dark secrets, no list of enemies. Yet the man, who had waited years for a single phone call, had met an end so violent that it defied logical explanation. The case was not just a professional challenge for Detective Apple, it was an existential one. The absence of a clear motive struck at the core of his understanding of crime and justice. In a world that often seeks to categorize events as comprehensible or incomprehensible, the death of Greg Flanagan remained, hauntingly, in the second column. Greg Flanagan was a beacon of stability and decency. Those who knew him, his brother, his colleagues, could attest to his commendable character. He kept to himself, usually retreating to his room at the Elegante early in the evening. He didn't haunt the hotel bar, nor did he engage in the sort of behaviors that usually attract trouble. Greg was not a drunk, not a womanizer, and certainly not a man prone to fights. He was, by all accounts, the kind of man most people inherently trust and like. Now this raises a glaring, unsettling question. Why would anyone target such a man for murder? It defies logic, yet the grim reality was, someone had. Detective Apple waded through this murky mystery as the leaves of fall gave way to winter's chill in 2010. He turned over every possible stone, traced every conceivable line of inquiry. One notable event did catch Apple's eye, a small but potentially significant incident on the evening of Greg's death. While preparing a simple bag of microwave popcorn, Greg had accidentally tripped an electrical circuit, causing a temporary power outage. The outage wasn't just confined to his room, it also affected room 349 next door and the rooms below. He'd reported this to the front desk, even humbly admitting his mistake to the maintenance man who restored the power. The electrical mishap gave rise to two theories for Detective Apple. Two theories that plunged the investigation into even murkier depths, amplifying the sense of urgency and despair. One moment you're looking at a popcorn mishap. The next you're diving into the grim intricacies of human behavior. It was as if the darkness was eager to unfurl its secrets, but not without demanding its due in diligence and agony. So the power outage led Detective Apple to two competing theories. Theory number 1, a deviant obsession. The maintenance man at the Elegante was no stranger to the darker alleys of human behavior. His criminal record listed him as a sex offender. It was a glaring red flag, one that became even more ominous when you considered Greg's peculiar injuries. A puncture wound to the scrotum and internal traumas. Could a long screwdriver have been the instrument of a sadistic, sexually driven assault? Detective Apple engaged in exhaustive conversations with the man, dug into his past, but found no definitive evidence to substantiate this grim hypothesis. Like a mirage, this theory shimmered with dark promise before dissolving into the realm of unconfirmed speculation. Theory number 2, an unplanned confrontation. The second path of inquiry led to union electricians, men who were bunked in room 349 just next door to Greg. These men were no mere travelers, they were in town for an extended period doing work for an oil company. By nightfall they congregated in one another's rooms, perhaps with bottles opened and conversations flowing. What if the electrical outage had interrupted their nightly gathering? What if, fueled by alcohol and annoyance, they had confronted Greg in the hallway? An altercation escalated and things spiraled out of control. But you'd sure think there would be some evidence of disarray if that was the explanation, and the electricians, when questioned, presented a unified front. No one had seen, or heard, or interacted with Greg from room 348. Each theory had presented its own set of questions, its own horrific scenarios, but neither bore the fruit of conclusion. Still, the painstaking inquiry led by Detective Apple refused to let go. It persisted. It gnawed, clinging to the slim hope that the veil would eventually lift to reveal the harsh yet necessary truth. As the investigation soldiered on, the question of why remained, hanging in the air like a haunting melody. Could a simple electrical fault unravel into such calamitous events? If anything, the journey so far has taught us that in the most ordinary settings, the potential for extraordinary evil lurks, often where we least expect it. 9 days after the murder of Greg Flanagan, as the questions continued to mount and the mysteries unfurl, Detective Apple donned a hidden camera and revisited the Cabana's wing 3rd floor with a fellow officer. Their mission? To re-question the same electricians, gauge their reactions, catch any inconsistencies, if there were any. What happened to that guy anyway? Lance Mueller broke the silence. His features were sharp and his dark hair was losing its battle with age. Clad in a t-shirt and blue jeans, he and Tim Steinmetz were the occupants of room 349. Hell, I don't know, admitted Apple. That's precisely what I aim to unearth. It's as though some enormous weight toppled onto him. We're fishing for witnesses. Sounds, whispers in the wind, anything really. Mueller and Steinmetz were reservoirs of silence, except for one trivial clue. They'd heard coughing from the adjacent room. As for the theory that something heavy had struck Greg, Mueller expressed the same bewilderment as Apple. There's nothing in these rooms heavy enough, he insisted. The lingering questions continued to ferment, like wine forgotten in a cellar. Weeks turned into months. Despite Apple's dogged pursuits, and Greg's family offering a $50,000 reward, answers remained elusive. Private investigators came and went. The riddle of Room 348 remained intact, an itch in the mind of every person who touched the case. And hopefully the mystery of what really happened in Room 348 will remain stuck like an itch in your mind, and you'll be back this Thursday, September 7th, for Murder at the Elegante Hotel, Part 2. Hey, if you like real-life murder mysteries and you know other people who do too, tell them to listen and subscribe to the show. I sure would appreciate it. Until Thursday, I'm Zevin Odelberg, and this has been Kinda Murdery.